For the sake of the recording, I'll just say we're here a few minutes early. I'm going to give us a few minutes once this thing starts, just for everybody to trickle in, and then we'll get going in earnest.
Should I mute myself when other people are speaking?
Good, Nert.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and I'm sure people are going to continue to trickle in, but we're going to get things underway. This is the Page One Power Summit episode dedicated to travel and hospitality. So our goal here is just going to be to shed some light on the unique challenges and opportunities that occur for websites and brands in the hospitality space, travel, restaurant, hotel booking, all that good stuff. And we're going to try to shed some insight into how Page One Power would go about overcoming some of those challenges and trying to build links for clients in those spaces. I've got an exceptional panel of people here. I'm Norm Vogeley. I'm just going to be moderating this thing. But the real stars of the show are with us right now. So I'm going to throw to them. Devontae, let's start with you. Just quickly introduce yourself and tell us what it is you do in the SEO world.
Yes, I'm Devontae Johnson. I've been at Page One Power for 4 years and some change, and I am the junior SEO content strategist. I position, contents or clients where they need to be and come up with a good content strategy for them.
Right on. Devin, how about you?
My name's Devin Boudreau. I've been at Page One Power for 9 or 10 years, something like that. I've had a bunch of positions within the company, but the past few years, I'm in charge of drafting up client strategies for the research department. So whenever we get new clients that come through, I kind of write up a plan of work, how we're going to make sure to get those research or like resource style links and kind of evaluate what that's going to look like.
Thank you, Devin. And last but certainly not least, Amethyst.
I'm Amethyst Tagney. I've been with Page One Power for about 4 years now. I'm the links specialist and I help get links published.
And for those of our audience who may not be familiar, can I have Devin and Amethyst just briefly explain what's the difference between the types of links that your respective departments get? I know Amethyst is on COT, so that's the content outreach team where they build content links, broadly described. Devin, you just said you're on the research team and you get resource links. So Devin, what is a resource link?
Kind of the way that we define a resource link is when you're on a website and they have like a links page or like a list of resources, generally broken down into like either topic or category, like kind of like subject matter. Those are the links that like the research department focuses on. We also do like brand mentions. So if a company is mentioned in a piece of content or just kind of anywhere that is like reputable in some way. So those are kind of the two primary ones at this point that the resource department focuses on.
So in the broadest sense, it's your job to find pages where it would make sense for our clients to have links. and then you ask whoever manages that page to add our links, correct?
Yeah.
And Amethyst, what's going on your end of the link building spectrum?
Yeah, so for content links, we deal with articles and the links in articles. So we submit articles to different online blogs, and they publish them hopefully. And we just link to our clients as resources. And so like when you read an article and you see a highlighted link that gives you some more information, that's the kind of links we're talking about.
Perfect. So Devin is finding pages where we want links added, whereas in the COT space, you are creating new pages and trying to persuade website owners to publish these all new pages that host our links. So in the most TLDR way, those are your resource links and your content links or your blog links. So that's just a little bit of background on the general types of links that we build. This is the summit episode on travel and hospitality, which, I mean, every industry has its own unique challenges. Every brand within an industry is, kind of its own thing. But I wonder if you could all just start out by telling me what makes travel and hospitality distinct in your eyes. Like Devontae, let's start with you. From a content creation standpoint, what would stand out to you looking at the kind of travel and hospitality sites that we plan on looking into more throughout this session?
You got a couple things in play. You've got local SEO,
Right.
and you've got your keyword focused content, just to see where their sort of content funnel is and if they've been building it properly and what we can do to help that.
Yeah. So Amethyst, I want to jump down to you because Devontae called out local really quickly. Is local an opportunity or more of a hurdle that you have to overcome when you're trying to build blog links?
I think it really depends. So for some of our travel sites, they really do like to have a more focused articles on different places to travel to. And when we write for some other sites, they really do not like that. They kind of wonder, why are we publishing articles on these very specific locations when we're located somewhere else, or our audience is very diverse. So it really just depends on the sites that we write for, the kind of content that they like.
What about on the resource side? Is it easier or harder, or does it not make so much of a difference if the client is extremely location focused?
I think it makes it a lot harder if, depending on your location, that's going to determine purely from a local level how many websites there even are. Like if you're in a really small town, you might only have a handful of websites about said town. But a bigger place like LA or Chicago, and then within that, another level of difficulty is when you have different like suburbs or like parishes or things like that. That adds an extra level of difficulty. And then kind of more generally speaking, for like travel sites from a research side or resource side, it's very money driven to me. Like you have a lot of people that are in there because they want to make money, and you have like a lot of, you'll notice on a lot of resource link pages, it's very like affiliate link heavy. And a lot of the websites I've noticed are just kind of, you have a lot of out of date websites where, maybe when Expedia or sites like that weren't quite as popular or as much of like a powerhouse, if you will, you had a lot more like smaller mom and pop travel type websites, as opposed to like now thinking of like travel agencies, for instance, and just kind of how they're not quite as popular as they used to be.
So for the benefit of our audience, I'm just going to give you a quick preview. What we're going to do is try to illustrate some of those challenges and opportunities through a few different clients that we've actually done link building campaigns for in the travel space. And we're going to go from kind of that retrospective look at what worked for a few specific clients to taking a look at other websites that are also in the hospitality space that we haven't completed campaigns on, just to explore how would we approach this, what challenges do we anticipate, what opportunities do we anticipate. And when we get into that point, we're definitely interested in hearing your questions, but we'd also be happy to throw, if you have a website or a domain or something that you would like us to review, talk about hypothetically, what would we do if this was a client? How would we build links to this? What ideas do we have? Just pop it into the chat. Likewise, any questions that you have, just pop that into the chat. I'll be trying to keep an eye on that, and I'll throw them to our panelists as I see them. So without further ado, I want to get into one specific example that we've already got pulled up. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's do that guy. So what we're looking at here is a website called, I pronounce it Blau Hotels, B-L-A-U. I don't know 100% if that's how you're supposed to say it, but this is a very unique kind of travel website. They specifically offer hotel booking, and their hotels under their family are all in just these 4 locations. So it's not like hotels.com or Expedia where they have hotels in every travel destination. It's just these specific spots. And when we worked on them, I think right away we recognized, kind of like Devontae and Devin pointed out, like having such a very strict local focus on the place names that you're trying to rank for, that's incredibly challenging. So one of the first things that we did that came out of Devontae's team, and I know their website is undergoing maintenance right now, so I just pulled up a copy of what the page used to look like. So Devontae, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with this page? Will climate change affect your travel plans?
Yeah, so with this page, we wanted to create a piece of linkable content, a linkable asset that could be placed on a variety of different external websites, but also at the same time appealing to a larger audience rather than just their specific locations. And in order to do that, we could topically connected it to climate change, and that opened up a much broader link runway for third-party sites, and it also it appeals to anyone who wants to be sustainable when they're traveling and things of that nature.
So for those of you watching, this paragraph right here, you can see these are the 2 branded links that we pointed to 2 specific landing pages that they were trying to support with this link building campaign. And as Devontae said, we're trying to contextualize these hyper-specific pages, these specific destinations and hotels, by connecting it to something by definition of global interest, climate change and travel plans. So you can see the travel connection, and then we're trying to use climate change as a hook to appeal to other websites. So we give our talking heads back. Amethyst, I know this was a major resource for COT to get blog links. What would that look like for an asset like this and a website like this?
Yeah, so the topic is super linkable. We can link to that all day. Sustainability topics, just eco topics in general, are very popular, very linkable for us. And that being said, how popular they are, it could be very hard to come up with like a unique spin to it that a site hasn't already written. And I feel like this article did a really good job of focusing in on the sustainability niche and made it so that we can link to it to a bunch of different sites, and they didn't already have content like this already. And so it was a huge win for us too.
So you mentioned a couple times trying to find a topic that websites will want, but that they don't already have. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so when we write for different sites, we try to make our the resources we use pretty unique, because for the most part, if a site already has an asset that talks about that same topic, they will just replace that link with theirs.
Sure. So we're trying to provide unique value with our assets while still being relevant enough that we can earn the link, right?
Yes.
So I want to pull up another asset that we have here. This, I think, almost goes against the warning that we got right at the beginning, where you said local makes things hard. And this, I think, is an article that we did not write. We did not recommend this. This was an existing asset. And it's all about one specific travel destination. that obviously it has some of their destination keywords in it. The whole thing is kind of built around promoting their specific destinations. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but I noticed we built as many links to this page as we did to this climate change page, which to me seems to go against the whole principle of you have to make it more general. You have to make it more broad to make it appealing. So what was it about this page that allowed us to actually build content links?
Yeah, I would definitely say this is an exception to the rule. Usually we do not see stuff like this in content. But I would have to say that that like this article is great for travel sites, just because like how I said earlier, that travel sites are really wanting like place focused articles. They want articles that, you know, they can tell their audience, like, go visit these places. This is what you can do at these places, instead of very vague articles about travel.
So this is the unusual case where we were able to follow our normal rule, but we were also able to kind of bend the rule a little bit. And I don't want to say get away with it, but we were able to link to the kind of content that websites and our clients more frequently want to have featured, because it has their keywords, it has kind of their primary kind of calls to action. So this has been kind of a study in what content link building campaigns look like, but I want to shift gears here and talk about Advantage Rent-A-Car. So this is probably a brand that you recognize. This is also a site that's undergoing some maintenance. So you can see like one entire section of their site is still under development. But we were brought in to work specifically on their rental car pages. And once again, they had specific locations in mind that they wanted to support with this campaign. So Devontae, I'd like to hear from you a little bit on how we went about executing this piece of content. I'm just going to look at the table of contents here to give people kind of an idea of the scope. But this was a massive resource that we put together for Advantage Rent-A-Car.
Yeah, and these, especially for, hotel and airport sites, these travel guides are sort of monumental and foundational in topically connecting it to a larger audience. So that's what we wanted to do here with the LGBTQ plus community, and just sort of showcase, just a travel guide for, the LGBTQ plus, and just get all the information in there that they could want. So, we could put it on some sites, relevant sites.
Yeah, so just the scope of coverage here, we have general information, a trip planning guide with all kinds of steps, a destination list, additional tips for international travel. And I know in some of the destination content is where we were able to link to some of the actual Advantage target pages. Devin, I wonder if you can build on what Devontae just said. Why LGBTQ plus?
I mean, to be honest, or to be very blunt, there are a lot of really good resource pages focused around that specific audience.
So to contrast this with what Amethyst was talking about, the resource we prepared for them was climate change focus, which is a topic, whereas this is an audience. How does that open us up to building resource links as opposed to the blog links we got with like a climate change related topic?
A lot of resource pages are focused around audience, or at least to me, ones that are still updated and still being utilized and whatnot are very audience focused, as opposed to more so like topics, generally speaking.
So as another example of that, I want to see if I can move this. There we go. So this is maybe, I don't know if this is more topical or more of an audience, but the other asset that we built for them was traveling with pets, specifically a guide to international travel with pets. So where does that fit into the resource link building strategy where you're trying to go after like a specific demographic?
The demographic for that would be more or less just like pets or like animal owners or owners, but just going after those type of target pages. there's a lot. One thing specifically with a lot of either pet or like animal hospital or vet type resource pages is they have a wide variety of different like websites listed that are all focused around pets, as opposed to being hyper specific. Like we only have these lists of like bigger like organizations or associations around said audience or topic. Whereas with pets, you have a wide variety of different things that are all related to pets. And generally speaking, they're much more link friendly, I would say.
So can you talk a little bit about how you know this because you've been doing it for a long time, but how does someone go about finding these and realizing, oh, there's a huge online niche that exists to serve the LGBTQ plus audience, or there are a ton of pages dedicated to helping pet owners be better pet parents? How do you go about finding that?
There's a couple of ways you can do it. Kind of the main ways that I'll do it is I'll plug in, said audience or topic, and then use other keywords like guide, or like, honestly, guide's kind of like a good go-to one, but I'll see like what comes up with that. And then I'll check their backlinks and see if they're actually getting like actual resource links versus like content backlinks. And then the other way is I'll do some search strings with some different search modifiers and see if there actually are target pages associated with said kind of like similar piece of, for the advantage one, kind of just seeing if there's other pages that are already like that that are being listed out, or things that are similar. More or less, I just want to see, is that type of we call it like link neighborhood actually out there, and or is anyone else already getting links like that? Because a lot of the times I've noticed you would think people would be getting resource links to content like this, but they're not.
Sure.
So then that opens up a good opportunity of like, oh, they have target pages like this, just no one's going after them.
So Devontae, I wanted to hear from you again on that point, because Devin's talking about what is already out there and who is being served. So a lot of the time we're coming up with topics, or we're trying to serve audiences with content where there's a precedent, right? We know that there's websites serving pet owners, or we know there's websites serving different demographics of travelers. So how do we take existing content like that and come up with an asset that deserves links in its own right, as opposed to just cloning what has already been successful?
Well, I mean, competitor research is a good one to go after, see what others are doing in those keyword spaces, and see how you can create an asset that will compete with those. That would be my big one, would be competitor research, and just find those content gaps, see what your competitors are doing, and see what you can do better.
Yeah. What can you define content gap a little bit? Because I know that's a term that comes up a lot internally when we talk about, we looked at these 5 pages and we see a gap here. What kind of gap are we looking for?
We're looking for missed opportunity or a underutilized, keyword target for a term that it's relevant and you probably should target it.
So just trying to cover more than what they're already covering, or if you look at 5 pages and they each cover something slightly different, can we create a page that in that Venn diagram of cover has a little bit of everything?
Yeah, or take it past that to sort of expand that keyword profile into new realms, I suppose.
So kind of a yes and, like, you had a good idea, but we can take it further.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Awesome. So I want to throw one more example out here that I think also gets to the heart of the hyper specific esoteric travel niche content that's out there. This was a former client of ours called JR Pass, JR meaning Japan Rail. So their whole deal is not booking trips, not booking hotels, none of that stuff. All they offer is the National Rail Pass booking options, so that you can hop from train to train for different amounts of time. So not only is it very location specific, but even the service is extremely niche, extremely specific. So this presented some really interesting challenges for us from a content creation standpoint, but then also from a link building standpoint. And Devin, I know the research team had not as much a content centric approach to link building, but you did something around fresh mentions.
Mhm.
So can you explain what that is and how one goes about trying to identify fresh mentions, or how you even recognize that there's an opportunity for that kind of link building?
Yeah, so whenever we get a client, first thing I would do is search their brand name on Google, just quotes, whatever their brand name is, and see if there's anyone talking about them on different online publications, whether it's like blogs or like news pages, things like that. You check the Google News tab first. You can check the non-Google News tab. And then I'll also throw in some different modifiers like in URL blog, like in title news, things like that. And you're just looking to see if anyone's actually talking about the client. And if they are, checking out those articles or pieces of content and seeing if they've actually like hyperlinked to the brand name, or if they're mentioning something a little more specific about said client, whether it was like maybe a study they did or they published their own piece of content that's getting referenced in some way. But
So I take it this was a little bit of a unique case then, because JR Pass, I mean, it's kind of their brand name, but it's also just the name of the thing, right? The Japan
Yeah.
Rail Pass. You could break that up a couple different ways. So were you looking specifically for brand mentions here, or were you just looking for references to the thing itself, the Rail Pass, to get links to this site?
for this campaign, as far as I can remember, and from like looking back through notes and whatnot, it was actually like brand name stuff.
Oh,
But
really?
kind of reading through, because that's like one thing that's really important when you're looking at brand mentions is reading through contextually what they're talking about, because not always the mentions you get are positive.
Right.
So you wouldn't want necessarily, if someone is speaking ill of said client, not this client, but just clients in general, you wouldn't want to get a link back to that if at all possible.
Right. So on the other side of things, I know that we built some resource pages, or resource links rather, to this asset, which this is an interactive asset. So this isn't something that we built, but as you can see, it's a fare calculator. So you click 2 points and you can figure out how much is it going to cost for me to travel, from city to city in Japan. And it looks like this was another really big winner for resource links. On the surface, it looks reasonably straightforward. What made this lucrative for the research team?
Honestly, I think the fact that it's hyper specific and useful and it's free, I think is a big thing. Like you have a lot of tools that honestly Google kind of has built into their like own platform or whatever.
Right.
Whereas this is something that's hyper specific. Like looking at the kind of links that we were able to get for this, they're all very specific, related specifically to Japan and or like traveling around in Japan, to where it's just getting on the topic of like relevancy. It's like hyper relevant to where when you're pitching it, you don't even necessarily have to sell it super hard, because the value is so clear on the surface of what this actually does.
Right. It's easier to build links when the content you're linking to kind of speaks for itself and it's obvious who it's for and what it's about.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's a more unique tool compared to something that a ton of different people already have, and like Google, for instance, whereas this is hyper specific. It's a little more unique to where like if you're pitching it to someone, they're gonna like, they should clearly understand it. Like, oh,
Right. And if you're even outreaching someone with an asset like this, they obviously would have the context already, right? For talking about Japan and travel and rail, or
exactly.
whatever else
Like,
is relevant.
with things like this, obviously the level of opportunity might not be as high because it's so specific, but at the same time, when you're pitching it, it's not as hard. So
Right. So the number of sites, the length of the runway is maybe not as much, but every site that's relevant is a real big winner because it's so profoundly relevant.
Yeah, I'm very pro. I'd rather stuff be much more specific, like to me for campaigns, whereas you might not be able to find as many target sites, but your conversion rate for pitching, it's going to be way higher. So you actually don't have to work quite as hard
Right.
to get
It's not
like good results.
I think this is a good first principle for links in SEO generally, right? It's not the number of links, it's the quality of the links. And I like that we're a half hour into this and no one has even mentioned DA when talking about quality or relevance or why you go after something or how you find it. You guys have all talked about looking for places where the link makes sense and the asset has real value. So I think that speaks volumes to how we would go about trying to support one of these clients. All right, going back to the more content side, we have this very broad article, why experiencing a new culture is good for you. Doesn't talk about Japan, isn't explicitly talking about traveling, although that's maybe implied in the article, talks about culture shock and things. So Devontae, where did this come from? Why would we pitch something like this to such a hyper specific site as JR RailPass?
Well, essentially because it's, you know, a rail pass is very specific and it's going to be hard to create and challenging to create any sort of very specific to Japan rail pass. But if we can sort of reach a broader audience to people who travel, people who want to experience new cultures and things of that nature, then we can appeal to several different niches and hopefully be able to acquire some backlinks from that.
So kind of the opposite of we're going to go hyper specific on places who are already talking about Japan. And we're saying, how can we make Japan relevant to a broader audience that's interested in travel and culture and topics like that? So Amethyst, what makes this so linkable then? Like we broadened the relevance, but what does this do for you?
Yes, like broadening that relevance does really help, because if it was more specific, then again, it's like the travel sites are going to be our main targets and we're not going to be able to use it on as many other sites. So it's really useful that that we can use it on other sites, since, you know, not all of our sites are travel related, and like it goes into a bunch of different things that we can put like on health sites, on self-improvement lifestyles. So it really just opens up a bunch of opportunities.
So we still have a travel focus, but we're trying to broaden who else this appeals to and what other conversations travel can be mentioned in. Devin, I appreciate you jumping in there. It looks like someone had a question. What is DE? I meant to say DA, domain authority, which is a proprietary metric developed by Moz, the SEO company. And it's kind of become the popular shorthand for measuring the quality of a site. It's a little bit of a misnomer because it's really just a measure of how many links are pointing to a site, and to a lesser extent, are they good links or are they relevant links? It's not half as sophisticated as Google's way of appreciating links, but it's easier to put a number on something than to kind of weed through the specificity and the nuance of how link building works. So very often DA is the threshold for, is this a good link or not? Whereas we're talking about looking at the relevance, the anchor text, the context in which the link appears, all these other things that matter. So those were 3 past clients that we've worked on. At this point, I want to change focus, and instead of looking back at what has worked in the past, look at some sites and try to figure out where would we go from here with the unique challenges that they present. So I'm going to share my screen on this new non-P1P client site. So this is Visa Gov. What they offer is travel visa services. So, I mean, this pretty much spells it out. They are just kind of an aid service to travelers, helping you get the visa for whatever international travel destination you have. So again, kind of like JR Pass, very, very specific. It's a document. It's not even like a booking or a reservation service. Although in this case, it's not as location specific. It looks to be anyone going to any of a number of different countries around the world. So right out of the gate, Devante, are you good with going first and telling us where do you look on a site like this to try to figure out how we would make them linkable?
I would look at their blog if they have one, first off the bat, and see what type of content they have. Travel guide in Armenia, things you can do Madagascar.
So pretty on brand for the most part. They're talking about the specific countries that they serve, destinations, things to do in their destinations. So basically place, name, and event. Amethyst, Devin, how does this strike you as far as linkability? It's obviously relevant. It's obviously on brand. Is there going to be a lot of runway for these very location specific kind of travel guide-y type pages?
Not to me from a research side of things, I would say no.
On content, like I said, we could probably get a couple on those travel sites, but for a long-term link building campaign, we wouldn't be able to.
So I can see if I was the owner of this site and you told me we can't get you that many travel links, my immediate question would be, well, don't I want mostly travel sites? After all, I'm a travel blog. What's the limiting factor in getting nothing but travel blog links to a travel service like this? Yeah, go for it.
I mean, what I would just say is you're just like really limiting yourself in terms of I guess like purely from a number standpoint, you're really limiting yourself. And I would just kind of bring up with the aspect of travel sites, I would ask them like, why are you in business? And they'd probably like, oh, we want to make money. And I'd be like, well, so do a lot of other travel sites. And when you look at their links pages, you're going to see that. So we want you to get links. So we're going to kind of have to venture out, not to mention, I would ask them like who travels, and they'd probably be like, well, everyone travels. So it's like, okay, cool. Well, then clearly you have a much wider like audience demographic. So let's like take that into account.
So in terms of brainstorming linkable content, how would we break outside this very destination centric approach to content? What kind of things might we brainstorm for them?
I would
go ahead.
I would say I would just look at their competitors first and foremost and see, do they have any pieces of content that are getting them links already, and kind of just get a good lay of the land, I guess.
Absolutely. I also probably, my mind, what's the difference between a travel visa and a work visa and those sorts of things, and probably snowball off of there.
So work visa taking into the sphere of employment, business. What does that mean for blog link building opportunity, Amethyst? If we go from the recreational and travel sites where you said the runway isn't as long, what happens if you break it into, what if we talk about kind of dinner table conversation issues, money, economics, finance, employment?
Oh yeah, it would be great, like, because the articles can still have a travel focus. It would just need to explore other topics like sustainability, ethical issues, adventure outdoors, just like pretty much anything else that we can tie into travel so that other sites will be interested as well.
We have a question here. Doesn't Google favor link diversity more often than not? Does anyone want to jump on that one? A little bit of a leading question. Does Google favor link diversity more than other link valuation factors?
I kind of responded and just said that Google doesn't like things that are manipulative or sketchy, to where I think that's like just a bigger, I would answer that with a bigger thing of like, link diversity is good because it looks natural, it looks real, as opposed to, oh, we have these hundreds of links pointing to this deep link that no one would naturally link to on their own.
Right. So it's a balancing act, right? You want a good diverse profile, which requires quantity, but you don't want to be sending signals that make it look like you've done something unnatural. And
Yeah.
by extension, if you're a travel blog like this, or a travel site rather, and you had nothing but links from, say, travel blogs, not only is that a fairly limiting quantitative feature for your link profile, but it also kind of makes it look like, wow, you really only get one type of link. Are you relevant to anyone else? Like, do you have value beyond this?
Yeah, and I think especially with the aspect of like link diversity, even if you're only getting links from travel sites, not even that that's a bad thing, but the likelihood that they'd all be going to the same few pages is probably pretty
Right.
high. So that kind of would send a red flag to Google that you're faking it.
So it's not just where you're getting links, but which pages on your site or across your site you're getting links to.
Yeah, and then I mean, you want to look at like the anchor, like if you were just using the same anchor text constantly,
Right.
and if it's like hyper specific keywords where it's like no one would naturally talk like this.
So as a reflection of the whole site's quality, how are people talking about you? How are they mentioning you? Does it look like actual people talking and not just a paid advertising campaign? So I wonder, this to me looks more like a resource page or something that you could build resource links to, Devin. What do you think about something like this? Student exchange programs in the USA in 2021.
Can you scroll through it really quick?
Yeah,
and I'll
yeah.
just give it a cursory look.
So what is it? Talk a little bit about the visas that you would need so you have an obvious connection to their resources, applying to universities, speaking English, and then the visa application process.
Okay, the reason why I don't think you could really build resource links to this is a couple things. First one, it's not that it's short, but it's not really like that long form of content. And a lot of resource pages, the way that they're kind of viewed is like, this is like, these are the pages that we think you need to know about. These are the pages that, or these are the websites that we think hold the highest value for said audience or like topic. A lot like the information on this page is good, but to me, it comes off like pretty surface level. Kind of like if you didn't know anything about this, here's the information that you need to know.
Right.
And if you're on a page about that, more often than not, you already have a general understanding of what that is. To where I think a page like this, and granted, I don't work in the content department, but I would think this has much more room for getting content links because you could be talking about something that I guess more broadly. But yeah, like the idea of the page in a sense is like resource linkable, but it's just, there's just not enough there to me that, and it's like too broad that the likelihood you'd be able to get resource links is pretty low.
So Devonte, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that because you brought up the topic of content gaps. If we were going to create a page with this title, how similar would it be to this, or what would you do differently to try to give resource a little bit more ammunition to build links to it?
I would probably try to target a specific audience a little better, I guess. I'm trying to determine sort of the cursory look, but
yeah, it looks like they're trying to target
too.
college students, but it's not really clear. And certainly from the title, they're just saying student. So
Student exchange, yeah.
it could be any age group, any grade level.
But I may not, it's hard because I'm not sure if I want to attach a date to it.
Right. Amethyst, you're nodding. I want to hear you responded to that. Why do we have a date in the title, and is that a good thing? What does that do to linkability if we kind of timestamp our content that way? USA exchange programs in 2021.
Yeah, having a date in the title, it just limits, how long this article will be viable for. Like, we're no longer in 2021, so already we wouldn't even be able to link to this. If they had taken the date off and still kept the same information, we would still be able to link to this probably for a while.
So we actually increase the linkability by taking away the time reference and just going, here's evergreen resources for this audience. And then to Devontae's point, we might do even better if we specifically said in the title, graduate student exchange programs or college student exchange programs, or something that makes it a little bit more clear who this is for and what they can expect from it. So for those of you in the audience, we're still accepting submissions. So if anybody has another website that they want us to look at, we can definitely jump into that. I have this one, which this looks to be an Italian restaurant. It looks to be a single location Italian restaurant. So not a chain, not a family of restaurants, but a single Italian restaurant in the Houston, Texas area. So once again, I think we have a hyper-specific location challenge with this kind of website. And, it's an Italian restaurant, so you can infer a little bit about it. This is a fairly nice, just looking at what they have from a navigation standpoint. I've seen more than my share of restaurant websites that are just a single landing page, and that's all the information that they have, but they've got a menu, they've got an about, they've got an events page, private bookings, happenings. So there's more than just one page to this website. What kind of linkability challenges do you see for this from a resource standpoint, Devin?
First and foremost, purely looking at what they have, there's not a lot of intrinsic value in terms of resource links. Like, generally thinking, why resource pages are there? Like, what purpose do they serve? For a site like this, there's just like, they kind of like don't connect in that sense. Like, I'm trying to think of a way to word it properly. At a local level, generally speaking, resource links pages are pretty low in terms of the quantity, and the ones that are out there, generally people are linking out to stuff that they've used personally, like, oh, these are our local friends, these are the businesses that we work with locally. Sometimes you'll get local resource pages, these are our partners and or sponsors, or if it's sometimes, depending on what niche you're in, these are all the business in the neighboring area type of a thing. To where I think, purely just looking at the site, like, there's just not any real resource link opportunity. I mean, maybe when we were talking about mentions, maybe they have some unlinked brand mentions.
Sure.
But
Just
even
going
that's
off the strength of the brand.
Yeah, and that's all purely dependent on, like you said, the strength of your brand, or people talking about you type of a thing. Like, but yeah.
So hypothetically, if we found they're not getting a lot of brand mentions, maybe this is a relatively new restaurant. Devontae, how do you take a single location, specific type of cuisine restaurant and come up with content that belongs on their website, makes sense for them to write about, but that Amethyst and her COP folks can actually use to reach out to different blogs?
So this one, I would say we probably would need to carry on that yes and sort of, you're in Houston, Texas, and provide some sort of keyword focused topics to position them in, not making that leap from just a restaurant to a huge broad topic, but maybe build on keyword focused, best places to eat in Houston, best, things of that nature, to sort of position them better. That's sort of a degree. Well, it first get some content on their site. And so we can start making those topical connections to sort of broader audiences. That's how I would build that out.
All right, we're getting low on time, so I want to try to go through a couple more submissions if we can. So This guy just came through. Generali Global Assistance. So this is a travel insurance company. So not as location contingent, but very specific type of resource in the hospitality space. So it looks like they have some resources. This is fairly keyword rich, right? How travel insurance helps, surprising features that you get from travel insurance, when to buy travel insurance, questions to ask about travel insurance, a pandemic specific resource. I assume they have more content than this, but just looking at this, Amethyst, how does this look to Caught? Is this enough to build links off of, or do we maybe need to think outside the box?
Yeah, I definitely think like this, I can definitely benefit from a little more diverse content, but like travel insurance obviously is also pretty linkable just because of traveling, and especially if you're going to some very far off place, like having travel insurance is probably a very good idea. And so even though sometimes insurance topics can be a little iffy with some editors, I think like if the title is worded right, like these articles can definitely, can be linked to, but we definitely need some more articles to work with for a long-term campaign.
So even though this is relatively low in the funnel because it's all talking about specifically what they provide to their visitors, you're saying that's not necessarily going to be kryptonite for link building, because it's still accessible and sensible enough that potentially there's an audience for this.
Yeah, especially like when you should buy travel insurance, I see us from all the ones here, probably us linking to the most if we had to choose one.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what else they have. Devin, is anything jumping out to you? You talked previously about, well, we can certainly go. They've got their logo up here. Clearly, this is a brand name, so obviously we could do some fresh mentions. But what else might you try to look for, or what kind of advanced search operators might you plug in to try to site find for this type of site?
I mean, the first thing I would do is go look through their sitemap and or like their blog on their site and kind of see, like, you're on the travel resources page. So I'd want to go through and see what do they actually have content wise that we could maybe already work on. And if they don't have any good content, or not, if they don't have any linkable content from a resource side of things, then I would do some more general searches and try to find guides, or if any of their competitors are building content that is getting like actual resource links.
So kind of like Devontae talks about the keyword gap or the topic gap, you're saying, look at what kind of links and what target sites their competitors are getting links from, and try to catch them up in that sense.
I mean, the big thing is I want to just look at and see, do they have any linkable content already on their site? If they don't, have their competitors created any linkable content that we can try to, not necessarily like, I'm very against copying competitor. I think that's a terrible strategy
Sure.
to do. But I want to see, have they at least figured out that you can get resource links this way, and what type of links are they getting? And if not, are there any types of like guides or whatnot that are getting resource links that you can kind of almost like reverse engineer
Sure.
into this? So I mean, that's kind of the way I would go about it. Like you mentioned mentions, that's the first thing I would always do, is see if anyone's talking about them. And I know in general, just from working on stuff like this, there are a lot of COVID resource links pages that are still being updated and whatnot. So I'd want to go through and kind of see, oh, do they have anything that is a little more, I hate using like buzzword stuff, but see if they have anything that's a little more evergreen, because a lot of the COVID resource pages have stuff that was very hyper specific to like 2020
Right.
or 2021, like early, like even before like vaccines were available, to where, do they have any content on their site that is a little more like evergreen in terms of COVID? Because then you could pitch it to those pages.
So I'm actually glad you brought that up, and I'm glad that you didn't do it until way late in this, because I didn't want to make the whole thing about COVID. But obviously, current events matter, especially for travel. We know COVID was hugely disruptive for travel, so I'm curious. Amethyst, he talked a little bit about how it's not necessarily the most evergreen resource from a research standpoint. Where are you at with COVID when it comes to travel and hospitality? Is that a good angle to take to try to make sites relevant to different blogs? Is that kind of played out? Are people tired of hearing about COVID?
I think at this point, I think editors are pretty tired. Like we have quite a few sites with like no more COVID articles. And of course, we still have sites that will accept it. But I think for the most part, as things are opening up now and people are traveling a lot more, I think COVID is less of an angle editors want to see in their articles.
So hot hypothetical, let's say a new disastrous variant emerges and travel is disrupted again. What do you think that does for our ability to do link building for travel and hospitality type sites, whether they're offering visa services or travel insurance, or in some cases, specific destinations like restaurants or beaches?
Yeah, that's definitely a hard one. Like I know with some of this, like the articles that we would write for travel sites would focus more like on staycations or doing stuff locally, trying to find ways or doing stuff outside, finding ways to advise people to travel safely.
So outdoor activities, outdoor destinations. Maybe the beach is looking pretty good in
Yeah.
a situation like that. Devonte, what do you reckon?
We always usually try to not minimize, but the pandemic definitely brought some things to light that we could definitely highlight, like work from home situations and stuff like that. And that's a broader sort of topic. And we can mention, the pandemic, but I'm not sure if we want to make the whole content about the pandemic. But it can highlight some very broad pain points and situations in which you should probably create content on.
And to Devin's point, if we went all in on talking about the pandemic and excuse me, those kinds of travel resources, eventually it ends, right? Eventually people start traveling again. What happens when your entire backlink profile is built around mentions of 2020 or the last shutdown? So probably there's still a lot of merit in going after the more evergreen type of resources that are relevant to your brand, relevant to your audience, and allow you to overcome what we certainly hope is just going to be a hiccup in people's travel plans. Well, we're just about out of time. I want to thank my panel for sharing their expertise and taking the time here. I want to thank everyone who showed up. We had some really good questions, and I appreciate that we had such a diverse spread of sites that we got to look at. Does anyone have any final thoughts? Travel and hospitality into 2022 and beyond?
I would say what's already been said. Don't timestamp or date any of your content ever. It's a bad idea.
It might work for social, it might work for an email campaign, but when it comes to SEO and earning links, you need content with more enduring value. I think that's a fantastic note to end on. So thank you, Devin, Amethyst, Devonte. You don't have to take a bow since we're just on camera, but I appreciate you sharing your insights. Thank you, everybody who came. If you had friends who weren't able to make it, we're going to have a recording that we can share out eventually. I think this will go up on our company YouTube channel. And yeah, this has been the Page One Power SEO Summit on travel and hospitality. Stay tuned, because I'm sure we'll have a lot more wisdom coming from our social and our website soon. So thanks, everybody.